Hello and yes, welcome back to another video, guys. That's right, we are reaching the end of the year. I know, it's crazy. So my end of the year videos are about to start kicking in, which means soon we'll be seeing my top 10 favourite films of the year, my top 10 least favourite films of the year. I'll be ranking every single movie I saw throughout 2022, and then I'll be giving you a top 10, maybe 20 most anticipated films for 2023. But another list I like to do at the end of the year is now I like to rank every MCU project, because we get a lot of MCU projects every year. There's always a nice little number there that's been added. So this year we've had 3 films, 3 shows, plus 2 specials. That's 8 projects we've had added to the MCU this year. So there's a lot more we got even more to talk about. So yeah, I'm just going to be ranking them. My opinion has slightly changed from last year. There might be a couple things in different orders. I'm going to go relatively quick because I've got 40 items to talk about. So I'm going to try and go a bit quick. I'm going to scooch over so we can see the lovely movie posters here as I go over them. Now, of course, as well, I want to say, remember, guys, this is just my opinion. It hasn't really been the best year for MCU stuff either, so I know that enthusiasm on it is maybe a little bit more downer than it has been on previous years, maybe. I think is maybe a way to word it, I guess. But anyway, we're going to do it nevertheless. Let's crack on. So last place, my least favourite MCU project is Captain Marvel. Yeah. Now, look, I like Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, and the character has grown on me through, her very small appearances in other stuff. She's always better in the things that aren't her own movie. There's a couple characters in the MCU like that. But this movie itself, why don't I like it? Purely because it's really forgettable and really boring, I think. There's just nothing that interesting that happens. I think Captain Marvel herself, she's not very likable in this film. She's very arrogant, and the only good thing about this is really Nick Fury. Everyone, and Ben Mendelsohn in it. Nick Fury and Ben Mendelsohn's character, they're really good. Other than that, everyone else is boring. Like, I always forget Jude Law's a part of the MCU. He's in this movie. The effects are not great. And I think Captain Marvel's just too overpowered for me. It's just a bit boring, I think. So yeah, Captain Marvel gets last place. Then, in 39th is going to be She-Hulk, the TV show. Yeah, the reason this is above Captain Marvel, because Captain Marvel was better than 8 of the 9 episodes here, I think, probably. Or maybe not. I'm going to say, actually, I'll change that to 7 of the 9 episodes. I like the opening episode. I thought that was okay. It was fine. Didn't do anything great. But I actually do really like episode 8 with Matt Murdock, Daredevil. I thought that episode was actually really quite good. If I ever get the urge to revisit anything from this show, it'll be just that episode, because that episode was really quite good. I liked what they done with Daredevil. He's the humor that they gave him. I know that some people didn't like it, but it was very kind of sarcastic, on the nose humor, which suited Daredevil. I thought he looked cool. His suit was decent, and yeah, I thought it was great. We didn't mess about getting to him. Once he was in the episode, he was in it. Unfortunately, the rest of the show is a complete disaster. I thought the actress who played She-Hulk was good, but yeah, all the side characters, terribly written. 90% of the humour, awful. There was the odd joke here and there that was okay. So many filler episodes. Abomination was completely ruined. The ending was dreadful. So, yeah, the show itself was, honestly, other than that one episode, which I don't mind praising, and the opening one, which was okay, the rest of this series was, honestly, dreadful. Then we have Thor: The Dark World, another pretty forgettable MCU project. It's just like, they knew they had to do a second Thor film, so they're like, yep, cool, let's do it. There are some good qualities to this one. Whenever Thor and Loki are on screen together, that's always interesting. Their chemistry is really good, and Tom Hiddleston's great in this movie. I think the costumes and the actual designs of, like, Asgard and stuff in this one, it's maybe the best Thor's looked, and the best Asgard's looked. Like, all of that looks great. The soundtrack's also decent, but you've got a very generic, very boring story with a very weak villain with very weak motivations, and there's so many cool layers to this film that they could have had. The Dark Elves are so old. They're one of the oldest villains in the MCU. They predate Odin himself. They go all the way back to his father. but they just have no presence in this movie, and even Christopher Eccleston is putting in a pretty terrible performance. So yeah, Thor: The Dark World really falls short of being a good movie, which is unfortunate. And then just in front of that, we have the first Thor film, which some people quite like. I just never really connected with this movie much. It's just very average to me. It's very middle of the road. It's a very bog standard origin story. There's, again, Loki and Thor are the best bits about it, but all the human stuff, not the best. And I never have an urge to go back to this one. It just doesn't feel like this film has much to say other than, hey, we need to introduce this character because he's going to be in the Avengers. And other than that, they just really don't have anything to do in this movie. It just feels very empty, very lifeless. And yeah, I think it will hands down be, if it wasn't the origin story, I think it would be one of the most forgettable movies in the MCU, to be honest. Then, coming in 36th place is Miss Marvel. I really like the character of Miss Marvel in the comics. She's really great. And the Avengers PS4 game that came out, which admittedly wasn't the best, she was really good in it. Probably the best thing about the game. So the actress seems absolutely wonderful in interviews and stuff. And she was good in the role. So I really wanted to like this show. And the first episode was so promising because it was just a build up to her getting her powers. But there was a very cool kind of style in the first episode, which I enjoyed. And then the second episode seemed to completely forget about that. They really didn't want to use her powers. And every time they did, it was always at the end of the episode in the most predictable moment. And she would always mess up. And until the final episode, it was so boring. It's like they didn't know where they were going with the show. Halfway through, they randomly go off to, I forget where it is. They go to where Kamala Khan's from. Somewhere in, is it India? I can't remember off the top of my head. Because as I said, the show was very forgettable, to be honest. But they just literally take you away from all the characters you've got to know. Try and throw more side characters down your throat and try and revamp this story. And it just doesn't work. It's really very lifeless show, very empty feeling. So the finale's cool. She gets her suit, and she finally uses her powers properly. There's a little mutant tease and stuff, and the end credit scene's really cool. So yeah, I'd say the first and the last episode's really good, but all of the middle stuff is just boring and forgettable, to be honest. Then in front of that we have, where are we at? We're here. We have in 35th place, we have Marvel's What If. Yeah, so What If? This show, look, this show's probably better than a couple of the next entries I'm going to talk about, but the reason it's this low is because of the potential. There's so many great stories and so many great things that they could have just done with this show, and instead they chose some really weird things. Like, for me, I like the one where Chadwick becomes Star-Lord, and then I like the Doctor Strange episode. I thought that was good. And then I actually like the Killmonger one where he becomes the Black Panther. And yeah, the finales were good. So there's some good in here, but then there's just so much, like the Party Thor one. I don't know what that was about. And it's just, as I said, there's just so much. The zombie one just should have been so good, and it just wasn't. So yeah, this is purely here out of pure disappointment. And I'm hoping that in season 2, they give us better stories and they up the animation. I know it's meant to look comic booky, but it looked really cheap at times, especially when you've got shows on a similar budget on Disney Plus, like The Bad Batch, which just look a million times better. So then in 34th place, we have the black sheep of the MCU, The Incredible Hulk. This is a film which some people really love now all of a sudden, weirdly. I don't know why. It went from being one of the most hated MCU projects to one of the most loved ones out of nowhere. Yeah, I mean, it's alright. It opens well. I like the fact we don't have to see him doing all the experiments on himself, because we've seen that a million times with the Hulk. We all know how it goes. It's a bit like seeing Peter Parker get his powers. We don't need to keep seeing this. Same with Batman. So that was nice, and as I say, it opens well, and I do like the ending. The final act is fun. There's a lot of great action to it. Seeing Hulk fight Abomination properly is really good. But the whole middle act and the love story is dreadful. It reminds me a lot of Attack of the Clones, weirdly, how that one opens up well with the chase through Coruscant, and then it ends brilliantly on Geonosis with the huge battle. But the love story in the middle, this parallels that movie to me. They've both got this really cringy, unbelievable love story. So, yeah, Incredible Hulk. I'd say there's probably more good than bad in this one, but it's just an okay movie. And then just in front of that, at 33, we have Ant-Man and the Wasp. Paul Rudd's great, and you've got a nice range of other actors and characters in this movie. You know, Michael Douglas is here, of course. And, the villains in this one are a bit more fun than the first film, I guess. But there's just no style to this movie, and the threats never seem that big either, especially in comparison to, we just had Ragnarok, Black Panther, and Infinity War before this. You know, all of them, huge consequences. Here, this one just feels like a really small movie. This feels like, it obviously these weren't a thing at the time, but the specials, that's what this realistically should have been. And yeah, Peyton Reed's got no character to this movie either. You're purely getting by here on the characters. So yeah, Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's fine. It's fine. Then, a movie which was a lot higher on my ranking if you follow me on Letterboxd, but throughout the year, I've really come to not like this movie as much. Thor: Love and Thunder. Yeah, this was like around the 20 mark on my list, and now here we are at 32, and it's dropped quite low. I think when I walked out the cinema, I was like, do you know what? I had a fun time with that. That was kind of switch off fun. Now I've sort of realised his story arc throughout Ragnarok, Infinity War, and Endgame. You see this character broken down, and it now just seems like he's a bit of a joke. And I'm going to be honest, not a lot of the jokes in the movie itself actually land. There's a lot of problems with this film, I've got to say. Some of the CGI is terrible in this movie. It's one of the worst looking Marvel projects, which is crazy because it's 2022. And like Iron Man from 2008 looks like a million times better. So, yeah, some of the acting isn't great. There's a lot of plot holes throughout this movie. And I really didn't like the way Taika went about promoting this movie. You know, it's almost like he knew it weren't going to go over great, and he started just bashing other people involved in this film. So, yeah, I do like this movie. I think it's okay. It's enjoyable enough, but there's a lot of problems with it, for sure. Then I have, in front of that, 31, Iron Man 2. Another one which gets a lot of shit, but this is where we kind of up it a bit, where we've gone from films which are just okay to, I think I can say this is good. I do enjoy Iron Man 2 a fair bit. I'm trying to rack my brain here, really, to try and figure out why there's such a big dislike. I'm guessing maybe because of the villain. I don't mind him myself, the Russian guy. Where is my bird? But, again, he doesn't feel that threatening until the last act of the movie. And he is very much just in the shadows, where the real villain of the movie is Robert Downey Jr.'s ego, or, Tony Stark's ego. And in the final act, you have the big villain come out. So I can definitely see problems with that. But I think there's a lot of fun to have with this movie. Visually, it's great. You've got a lot of good music in it as well, AC/DC and stuff. You get to see War Machine come to be in this movie, and that's interesting. It could have been done a little bit better, I guess, but I really like it. And I love the development of Tony Stark in this one, seeing him become an alcoholic, and then you do see him finally, get with Pepper, which is nice to see their relationship finally get there, because we didn't quite get there in the first film. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of fun to be had with this film, nevertheless. Then, in 30th place, we have Captain America: The First Avenger. Another decent opening movie, first origin movie. I like the fact it's in World War II. Does make it feel different to everything else in the MCU. I think the first two acts of this film are really good. Seeing this guy, not being used to his full potential. Steve Rogers, he's going around like a circus clown. The final act goes a bit superhero heavy, as most of these films do. But it's fine, it's fun. I like the Red Skull as a villain, actually. He's always been one of my favourites. Just because he is just, he is a bad guy. he's the, yep, I just want to destroy the world because I'm an arsehole. Not loads of character to him, but he's a fun villain to watch. And a lot of the side characters in this one are really good as well, which is a shame because, you know, they sort of get left in the past, whereas Steve Rogers comes to 2012 after this one. So, yeah. But anyway, it's a decent film. And then in front of that, 29th, we have Avengers Age of Ultron. This film should be so much higher. It should be so much better. There's some very cool aspects about this movie. Seeing the Avengers together, the proper introduction of Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and then Vision. Ultron himself is really cool. James Spader does a brilliant job voicing him. And that party scene at the start is really, really good. But Ultron should be a lot stronger than this. Or he is very strong in this movie, but you can tell that they just had to weaken him, because I don't think this group of Avengers was strong enough. I think you need, like, everyone, like, that you'd have in Infinity War, Endgame, or, you know, the upcoming Secret Wars, I'm guessing. So, yeah, unfortunately, there's a big issue there, and I think by weakening him, having this really strong character and then bringing him down like that, you can tell some plot points here, some plot holes that are going to occur. And I think with that comes a lot of problems with the actual film itself in terms of the pacing. And I don't like Joss Whedon's style much in this one either. You know, don't get me wrong, I have some issues with his style in everything he does, because I'm not a huge fan of the guy. But here, the film just looks a bit gritty. It doesn't really feel that fun and vibrant like the first one did. And, yeah, I don't know, there's some real pacing issues with it. Like, there are things you will also forget about this film. I always forget that you get to meet Hawkeye's family. These things should be a bit more memorable, I think. But anyway. Now, just in front of that, in 28th, we have Black Widow. Now, Black Widow I didn't mind, but this film should have come out before they decided to kill her. And, you know, Black Widow, I really like the first two acts of this movie. It feels like that spy movie, you know. It even opens really well with, you get a backstory and then they play, there's like a cover of a Foo Fighters song. And it all feels really cool. It feels kind of grounded and gritty. And I like meeting her family as well, seeing how messed up they all are in different ways. And then the final act of this movie happens and it kind of falls apart. Becomes a big CGI fest, which, don't get me wrong to say, you can't kind of expect with these movies. And half the time they do pull it off, but this is one of those where they didn't. The villain, Ray Winston, terrible. Taskmaster, not interesting at all. So again, it's just, you get the heroes, they all done really well. Like Florence Pugh, perfectly cast in this movie, and I love her character, Yelena. The Red Guardian and the mum, they were fine, they were enjoyable enough, but everything from the villain standpoint, just not very well done at all. So yeah. Then we have The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Again, another show where there are episodes I really liked, like the first two, and then I really liked the one on the farm and the ending one. But then there's like episode 3 and 4 in the middle where it's just like, yeah, feels like nothing happens here. It feels like the story is very disjointed. Now, there was a lot of reshoots on this one because I think the original plan for the show was to have a virus get out, but then COVID happened. So, you know, they thought they'd rework it a bit, which is understandable. But I think with that comes a lot of issues when you're rewriting something that close, and you can tell the story feels very disjointed. The pacing itself wasn't great, and again, this probably should have been a movie. It feels like it should have been anyway. Then just in front of that is Eternals, which a lot of people probably gonna say, why is that not lower? But I actually don't mind Eternals. I thought it was okay. There's problems with this film, definitely. You know, there's huge pacing issues. It is too long. There's no doubt about it. And a couple of the lead characters are kind of boring. I'm hinting towards the guy that shoots lasers out of his eyes. And I really like the actor, you know, I've seen him in a few things, but he was just really wooden in this movie. But, saying that, I think you've got a very interesting story. There are some plot holes in it, obviously, yeah. But I think it's a very interesting story, which I liked. I liked seeing how they influenced mankind. And I thought the range of characters, most of them were good, and I thought that they were developed well enough. I also want to say, visually, it was one of the best looking MCU films. It was a crime that it didn't get nominated for Best Visual Effects. Shouldn't have won, but it didn't even get nominated, which was kind of laughable, to be honest, yeah, because it purely didn't get nominated because of the backlash of the actual movie, because it's a very good looking movie. It's and then the score was good, and I thought Chloe Zhao done an okay job directing. Nomadland is obviously far superior, but I think with this movie, she had a huge task to do for her first blockbuster. It was fine. There's just pacing issues there. The film could have been trimmed down a bit, and as I say, maybe a more interesting lead there. But anyway, just in front of that, we have Spider-Man Far From Home. I like this film quite a bit. Again, this is where we step up again in terms of quality. We go from like, yeah, it's good to, yeah, I really enjoyed this. This is a lot better. But again, obviously still some issues with this one. This is a very good movie though. It's really enjoyable. I love seeing Spider-Man interact with Nick Fury because he's so stubborn. And I thought Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio was fantastic. Actually, Jake Gyllenhaal himself and, of course, Mysterio's look. He looks incredible. So, yeah, absolutely massive props to that. And I like the plot of this one. I know people hate it because it follows the Tony Stark stuff again. But, this is the aftermath of Endgame. So I quite like all of that. There's just a few nitpicks I have with this one, really. It's like he's walking around on London Bridge without his mask on for like a solid minute at the end. And it's like no one knows he's Peter Parker. I know it gets revealed afterwards, but... And it's just little bits like that where it's like, I wish the filmmakers would have taken a little bit more care here. But it's my least favourite of the three Spider-Man films, but it's still a pretty good movie. Then we have the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. So I've just reviewed this one here in detail. And yeah, the reason it's this low is because it really doesn't bring much to the MCU, doesn't add much to the table. But, that's what it is. It's a very self-contained thing. And it is just there for you to have a 45-minute fun little journey. You get to see Mantis and Drax, two of the more undeveloped Guardians, go on a little Christmas adventure, which was great. I love the fact that they focused it on these two and not just Rocket and Star-Lord, because Rocket and Star-Lord are the two that we know the most about, and I feel like that's going to continue in the third film. It's nice to spend time with the Guardians that we don't know as much about, and I grew to like Drax and Mantis a lot more in this. I thought Kevin Bacon was really fun in it. The festive feeling was great. The colours and the music. That song at the start's a banger. So yeah, I really don't have any problems with this one. As I say, it's just this low because, it is what it is. It's a very self-contained, it's its own little thing. Then we have Hawkeye, the other Christmas festive Marvel property here, which, again, this started so well, Hawkeye. I loved the first 3 episodes, and then it just took a nosedive for me. Episode 4 done this thing where nothing happened, and then in the last act, there was a little bit of an action sequence, and it teased Yelena. And then the following episode, nothing happened, and it got to the final bit, there was a little fight, and it teased Kingpin. And the final episode was just sort of like a big clusterfuck fight, and it just got really quite messy. And it's a weird one, because I love the first 3 episodes, and overall, I do like the show. Like, the final 3 are fun, they're switch off kind of entertainment, but yeah, the first 3, this show would be a lot higher if the last 3 episodes had been better, I think. There was some good dialogue, some really cool characters. Hawkeye was great, seeing Yelena was good, and Hailee Steinfeld as the female Hawkeye, I've forgotten her name off the top of my head, but she was great, very well casted. I liked a lot of the side characters in this one as well. So yeah, it's a very good entry, this one. Then we had the first Ant-Man. Again, sort of like the last Ant-Man film, filming-wise, there's not much style to this film. Peyton Reed doesn't really bring loads to the table. Saying that, Quantum Mania looks a lot more interesting, so we'll see. Hopefully that will change when I come to do my ranking next year. But, this film I definitely prefer because the story seems more solid. It feels like the villain has more of a threat, even though the villain's kind of weak, but the threat of him is a bit more present. Also, this film obviously introduces all the characters, and I think it does a great job at that, and making them all very likable. And you really do feel like you get to know all the characters from the main team with, Hope and Hank Pym and Scott. And then you've got Scott's friends, and you really do feel like you get to know all of them, and I think it does a good job at that. good pacing, fine runtime, decent CGI. It's a fine film. It's very entertaining because it's Paul Rudd, and the humour works really well with him and his character. And then above that, I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So yeah, I'm this film here, I really have grown to like more and more with every watch, and I will be doing a rewatch of all the Guardians stuff in the build up to Volume 3, which I'm very much looking forward to doing actually. And yeah, I think this film visually it's great. And I really like some of the character arcs they choose to focus on here with, like, the sister bond between Nebula and Gamora. And I think the whole stuff with Ego is really well done. I think his turn is just way too quick is one of the issues I have with the movie. Where, you know, he just sort of goes to Peter, oh, well, I had to put that tumour in your mum's head. It's like, why did you say that, man? He was there on your side. You sort of had him and you've just... and the final fight was good. But all the stuff they do with Michael Rooker's character is just so good. Yondu really become one of the best characters in the entire MCU in this movie alone. So yeah, well, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was a really solid movie. Then, in 20th, we have... just 20th, we're halfway. We have Black Panther. So yeah, this movie here was so good till the final act. And I rewatched it before Wakanda Forever. And yeah... solidified how much I love the first 2 acts of this movie, getting to see this whole culture and get to know Black Panther himself more, because obviously we'd only seen T'Challa in Civil War, but getting to see him more and see his family, just getting all of that, taking all of that in. It's so good, and the story's great. Killmonger's a really good villain. I love the switch they do with him and kind of killing off Claw. I thought that was really well done, very surprising. And it gets to the final act, and yeah, the fight it's kind of painful to watch, and the dialogue gets bad as well. It's a really weird turn the movie takes, but the first 2 acts are so good, and it is one of the best origin stories, and one of the best lore-created Marvel films. Like, the whole lore behind the Black Panther world and Wakanda is so cool. So, it really deserves to be this high. Then just in front of that, we have Doctor Strange, who is the other character like Captain Marvel, where I always tend to prefer him in the films that aren't his own. But this was a cool origin story. I really liked it. It was just fun to see someone with such unique powers, because every superhero film up to this point had always been, you know, man can fly, man can hit things really hard, man can transform, you know, person can shoot, bow and arrow, boom. And, you know, run really quick, whatever. It goes the same for Marvel and DC. It was cool to see this hero in one of these big modern blockbusters do some magic powers. That was very cool, very intriguing to me. And Benedict Cumberbatch was such a good cast. His outfit is great. And yeah, I really loved everything about this movie, but the villain. I think the villain was just really naff, but his motivations were sort of there, and there was a bigger badder out there. So once we got to that, it was a bit more interesting. But yeah, I thought the pacing was really good to this one. All the side characters were great. And just the overall push of the plot to get from A to B to C was really well done. And yeah, I really enjoyed this film. Then we have Iron Man 3. This is going to be controversial. I really like this movie. I'm a big fan of this one, actually. I think it's one of the most overly hated movies for no apparent reason. But yeah, Iron Man 3 is just... there's so many great elements about this one. I think taking the whole superhero out of suit and making him work to earn it back, because this came out obviously the same year as The Dark Knight Rises, was it? Or the year after. I thought it's done it better than The Dark Knight Rises. Not saying the movie's better, but I think it done that side of things a lot better. I think RDJ gives one of his best performances here. I think the villain is really cool, and I actually like the switcheroo they done. And that's going to upset some comic book fans, but I think it works well. And yeah, I really like what they do with all the side characters in this. Pepper, she gets a lot of time to shine. Happy even has his moment in this one. And yeah, just I think visually great as well. The pacing's fantastic and the plot's really good. I think it's a very solid film. And coming in 17th place is going to be Sam Raimi's Doctor Strange Into the Multiverse of Madness. I wanted this to be so much better, and the trailers made it look a lot better. Don't get me wrong, it's a good movie. I've got it this high, but yeah, I think the thing with Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness is there's just some real pacing issues, and it's weird because when I saw the film, I didn't like the start of the movie because it felt so rushed. And I didn't like the last act in the movie because it felt like it peaked in the middle. But then I re-watched it when the 4K came out, and because I knew that the Illuminati were coming, funny enough, I actually really got into the start of the movie more, even though it still feels very rushed, and I really enjoyed the final acts of the movie. And it was the Illuminati that then felt out of place to me. It's like they went, right, we got to just do some cameos here. It's a very strange film, this one. I guess it depends on how you're feeling when you watch it, because it's like a film of two sides. You've got that bit at the beginning and the end, you know, the first and the final act, where it is the multiverse of madness. Even though you only go to one multiverse, it's a bit of a stupid title, if you ask me. And then you've got the cameo section. So, but this film does have balls to it. You can feel Sam Raimi's style, which is why it's this high. There are so many cool shots. Visually, while there are some weak CGI moments still, there's a lot of great stuff in here, and you can really feel Sam Raimi's touch on this movie. And yeah, I think this film does a lot right. But for me, I think now that I've had nearly a whole year to think about it, because it was one of the first projects we got in 2022, I think I can confirm that I think it's the Illuminati stuff I have the most problem with. And, you know, there's a lot of stupid stuff that comes with that Illuminati bit, with, you know, the smartest man alive giving away their most powerful members' powers to Scarlet Witch. So, yeah. But anyway, yeah, I think it's a good movie, but it's let down by some very easy flaws. Okay, then just in front of that, we have Werewolf by Night, the first Marvel special presentation, which, man, this was so cool. I'm a huge fan of the Universal Monster films, so seeing this was really good. I feel like this is where the films step up again here. This was great. The visual aspect of this one, the black and white stuff, so great. There wasn't a weak moment of CGI in this one. The very few uses of colour, great. The werewolf looked incredible. Man-Thing looked fantastic. And I want to give huge props to the guy who plays Werewolf by Night and the actress in this one. And the guy who directed it is his directorial debut. Fantastic. I really love this project. Wish it was a bit longer. Then in 15th, we have Black Panther Wakanda Forever. This is such an emotional movie. You know, R.I.P. to Chadwick Boseman. Absolute legend. It was so sad at the start and the end. And then in the middle, it does this very interesting thing where it brings these two cultures head to head, with Wakanda and this new underwater place, which name I'm forgetting in a minute, which of course is where Namor is from. I've seen a lot of people complaining about the plot of this one. I really don't think it's too bad. There is a little bit of messiness to it here and there, but I think it's really interesting where they go with it. And I think that all the stuff with the mum and Shuri and Baku is just fantastic. And the only issues I honestly really have with this film is everything to do with Ironheart. Seems like Ironheart felt very forced in. The script was really bad when it came to her, but it was really quite good elsewhere in the movie. And the CGI on her suit was dreadful, whereas the rest of the movie looked really good for the most part. So yeah, it's a really good movie, but unfortunately the Ironheart stuff just didn't work for me, which is going to be interesting when their show comes out. Then, in front of that, 14th, we have Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. This is a film I really wasn't interested in because I'd never read a Shang-Chi comic. A lot of these characters I did know, and I've read a few comics of theirs before seeing their movies. Shang-Chi was one that I had no relation. I knew nothing about him. But, man, this film is so fun. It's so rewatchable. I think what I love about this movie is the pacing's just brilliant. From start to finish, there's not a moment where you're bored or you feel it's going too fast. It is brilliantly paced, which is why I think this director is a great pick for the next Avengers film. Plus, I love all of the characters in this. I think that the Shang-Chi himself is great. Awkwafina, who I thought was going to be annoying as hell, wasn't. I really like his sister in it, and the villain, the real Mandarin, great. And how they use their powers with the Ten Rings, so cool. It looks great. So yeah, I'm quite a big fan of this one actually. Then just in front of that, we have Spider-Man Homecoming. I mean, I grew up with the Sam Raimi trilogy. This one's quite nice to see. This is the most grounded Spider-Man film we've got in the MCU. And it has that connection to the Avengers, which I know people got bored of. They wanted just a Spider-Man film. But at this point, I wanted to see Spider-Man interact with Iron Man. I wanted to see him interact with everyone, because we had 5 films that come before this where that wasn't the case. So I really like the fact that here we got to see him interact with Tony Stark, and he was kind of a mentor, and you do get to see him be a kid at high school in this one. And the villain, Michael Keaton's Vulture, great. That relationship that they have near the end, so good. The car scene, brilliant. Really good film. Then we have the one that started it all in 12th place. We have Iron Man. I mean, you know, there's very few flaws with this one. You know, I think Robert Downey Jr. for a start is one of the best casting decisions ever. In this film, again, I want to come back to pacing. This film never feels like it's going too slow. Never feels like it's going too fast. It's perfectly well done. The actual origin story bit, they ace. The villain's good. Visually, it's a stunning film, actually. This has some of the best CGI, and Iron Man looks incredible in it. So yeah, really like this one. Then, in 11th place, we have Avengers. Avengers Assemble, Avengers 2012, whatever you're going to call it. Now, I do have a couple issues with this one, but for me, this one is so fun. And that final fight scene, whenever I just want some really easy watching Marvel stuff, the final act to this movie is always a good place to go. I like seeing the characters come together. The middle act is maybe where it goes a bit wobbly, the movie. But overall, there's just so much fun to be had here. And Loki works so well as a villain in the team. Seeing all these characters interact together for the first time is great. It's one of the best versions of the Hulk in this movie as well. The only thing I'm not a big fan on is maybe the colour palette of this one. It looks like more a high-budget TV show episode. But, yeah, Avengers, so much fun. Okay, we're into the top 10. We're into the top 10. Number 10 is going to Captain America Civil War. This film here, I done a triple bill to see this one in the cinema, actually. And, yeah, there's so many incredible aspects about this movie. Although, the thing that annoys me is I wish we'd got a proper third Captain America film. Because, let's face it, it's an Avengers film, this. But it does a lot really well. It's really a shared screen time between Cap and Iron Man. And then you've got a sprinkling of other Avengers while introducing Black Panther and Spider-Man. But what it does well is I think it balances out the teams really well. It actually makes sense why members are on each side. And there's some really cool fight scenes in there. I think the first act in the movie is fantastic. The second act with the airport scene I think is really good as well. The final act for me, I feel like because it ends on the the second act, ends on the big civil war. That when you get to the final act, it's great seeing the Winter Soldier and Cap versus Iron Man. But you know, I feel like the film peaked at the end of the second act. So, but it's a very good film. Obviously, I've got it this high. There's a lot of fun to be had with it. It's a little bit grey looking in the colour palette as well, but overall, very solid movie. Then in 9th place we have Avengers: Infinity War. Yeah, so this is like, I think this would be most people's top 5, probably a lot of people's number 1. The reason it's not my number 1 is because I prefer something a bit more meat on the bone in terms of plot, I think. But what I do, love about this one is everyone's in it, and it's just so cool to see Thanos finally arrive. And this is where I was honestly expecting the MCU to start to go wrong, but because it's such a big task making this movie an Endgame, but here they really pulled it off. It works really well. The pacing's good. Each character seems to get a good amount of screen time. Other than maybe Cap, he's the only one that sort of feels like he fell a bit short to me. But it's so great to see all these characters finally interact. The issue I have with it is there's a couple big pauses between some characters, like Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man go to space. And honestly, when they go on the big donut ship that leaves Earth, it takes like 40 minutes to come back to them. And all of a sudden you do eventually come back to them and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about these guys. But yeah, Infinity War is great stuff. Then in 8th place we have Loki. I was a huge fan of this show. I love Loki himself. Tom Hiddleston's great. And I love time travel stuff. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. And I love mystery stuff. So this had everything for me. This was like almost like it was written for me. And there was so many cool aspects about it in the way that things looked, like the time, I forget what she's called, but the clock thing and stuff. All the side characters were great. I loved the female Loki. I thought she was fantastic. Owen Wilson was great in it. And then you get to those last couple episodes where you go to the place where all the Lokis are, which was my favourite episode, the 5th one. And you meet like old Loki played by Richard E. Grant, and it's just so good. And the finale maybe is a bit too heavy on the setup, and it didn't feel like an actual Loki finale. it really just sets up Kang. But it's still very cool. I like the last episode a lot. He Who Shall Remain, or whatever he was called, was very cool. So yeah, love Loki. Then in 7th place, we have Moon Knight. Moon Knight, again, really, really great. Maybe the ending fell a little bit short again, but this was so cool. Oscar Isaacs killed it in this role. He was so good. And it really it was just his story, which I love. The only real side character you get to know is the, I forget her name, but the woman in it who's also really good. Her character's really well written. But it's just their story, and it is so well done. From their journey takes them, of course, from London to Egypt, and it is just so cool. That story is carried across so well. Yeah, I've really just loved this show. Ethan Hawke plays a great villain as well, and his powers, and my God, Moon Knight looks so cool. Episode 2, was actually surprisingly my favourite, purely because of where the plot went, and some of the cinematography in it was absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, Moon Knight's number 7. 6th place is going to Thor Ragnarok, which is really weird because Love and Thunder is so low. So as you can see, Taika really aced it for me on one of them. I really liked this. It felt like a breath of fresh air for Thor. He was humorous in this one, but there was also a serious dark side to it. The villain felt a lot more threatening. Hela was great. And, there were consequences to this movie. With Ragnarok, the destruction of Asgard. And there was we had the death of Odin, and I thought that was really well done. And yeah, so many other cool bits. It's also, I feel like a Thor film needs Loki, so it was really great to have Loki in this one as well. And, you get your Doctor Strange cameo and whatnot, and the end credit scene is very cool. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Ragnarok. Then, in 5th place, we have we have WandaVision. I love this show. I loved everything about it, to be honest. This is where we get to the point where I really have no complaints, because I truly loved this show. I thought it was great. I thought it was so creative how every episode was a different decade, and you could tell that every episode was influenced by something else, another sitcom, because it's what Wanda grew up on. I thought Elizabeth Olsen was brilliant in this series. All the side characters, Agatha, were just so great. Paul Bettany as Vision in this was also excellent. And I loved the way it ended. People just built up in their head that Doctor Strange and this person and this person and Mephisto and this person were all going to show up. And then when it was an actual WandaVision finale, people moaned about it, which was a real shame. So yeah, I absolutely loved WandaVision. Yeah, yeah. Then in 4th place, we have Spider-Man Far From Home. As I say, I grew up with the Sam Raimi trilogy. I don't love it as much as some people, but I grew up with those films. So seeing Willem Dafoe come back and Alfred Milano come back was just so cool to me. Like Green Goblin and Doc Ock, two of my favourite Marvel villains ever. And seeing, of course, Toby and Andrew was hype as hell. And yeah, maybe there is a bit of nostalgia pushing this one a couple places higher on the list than it probably would have been otherwise, if not. But it's a really good movie, I think. It has a lot going on it. From the word go, you're chucked into the story because there's a big cliffhanger at the end of Far From Home. And you straight away start getting your little teasers and like Daredevil showing up. There's an emotional impact that happens around the middle of this film. And you really feel this journey. This is it for Peter. You really feel like this is a big end to his story. Of course, I don't think it is. But it's a really good movie. I think the pacing's really good. And yeah, I can see why this film done so well. Coming in 3rd place is Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, James Gunn's masterpiece. I loved this movie. It had to introduce 5 characters, make them all relatable, and let's not mention that they're all really weird characters. One's a talking tree, one's a talking raccoon. But by the end of this movie, you care so much about all of them. You love them all. And saying that you go on this incredible story with them, one which does have huge impacts. This is an Infinity Stone they're after. And throughout this movie, you're layered and layered and layered with so many cool plot points to this movie. You get to see the Collector. Thanos is there. Of course, you've got the main villain, Ronan. You've got the Ravengers. There's so much going on in this movie, and it all just feels perfect. It's all slots together so well. It's like when you got a jigsaw. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, for example, so that's a 300-piece puzzle. I feel like that movie's missing like 80 pieces or something. This one's not missing a single piece. It all slots together perfectly. There's a lot of humour to it. There's a lot of emotional impact to it, and visually as well, great. The CGI, fantastic. Some of the cinematography, gorgeous. So many great things for this movie. Okay, coming in second place is going to be Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Every time I watch this movie, I'm just like, wow, this is actually awesome. I think the plot itself is so intelligent, and I love the fact that this has a much huger impact on the MCU than like Age of Ultron does, which, comes only, I think it happens, only a year after this one. So I love that. I think that this film does so much right there, and I think the characters itself, it makes Steve so much better and cooler. It develops his character, shows him questioning things more. Physically, he's doing more. He's doing flips and stuff. He's a bit more, feels more like a superhero. He's using the shield more. And the same goes for Black Widow. It feels like here they really developed her character more. And you do get worried for your characters here in this one. And I think the villains are really well done. And, honestly, the CGI is just fantastic. And the score's good as well. So, yeah. No complaints with that one. Number one is going to Avengers Endgame. Maybe a bit predictable. I don't know. Maybe a bit safe. There are plot holes in this film. Of course there are. At this point, when you get to this level in the MCU where you've got Doctor Strange interacting with all these characters, like, yeah, why didn't he just open up a portal there? Or why didn't they just, why didn't he do the time thing or something? Why didn't he use the time stone there or whatever? There's loads of plot holes you can come up with these Avengers films. But I love the story they tell in this one. It revisits the first 10 years. It pays homage to this era of the MCU so well. What's probably going to be known as the best era of the MCU, because Phase 4 hasn't been the best already. And our original team, it's such a nice send-off for some of them. And it really feels like the ending and a really good one. So yeah, I'm not going to bore you to death with me talking about Endgame anymore. Or the MCU, there we go! That video turned out a lot longer than I thought it would. So yeah, guys, there we go. There's my MCU up-to-date ranking. I know, as I say, it hasn't been the best year for MCU stuff. I know we have Moon Knight and Wakanda Forever and Werewolf by Night, and then all the rest sort of fall from the, yeah, it was okay to range. But I'm really hoping next year we get, Guardians 3 is looking great. So I'm hoping next year has a bit more energy for the MCU. But anyway, there we go. I hope you've enjoyed as always, guys. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, leave a message. And as always, I'll see you next time for another video. Bye-bye.